This is part 2 of Eagle Flying Over the Kremlin. The last time I spoke a little bit about my carving tool, which also is a polishing tool. It burnishes. And for the last couple of weeks, I've been going over it to try and get a shine. Now, the reason for that is when you ink a piece of scrimshaw, no matter what the material, you have to get the surface smooth enough that it will resist the ink except everywhere where you scratched. Everywhere where you incised, the ink will go in and stay. Everywhere where you polished, the ink will go on and wipe off. That's the theory. I don't know for sure if it'll work because I've never done one before, my first project, with an ostrich egg. But I've done about every kind of ivory and nautilus shell and cowrie shell, and I'm going to use oil paint. Now, if you use as the standard 19th century whalers, they had a big pot on the deck called the tripot, which they would melt down blubber, render it down into oil. That was the oil of the day. They were the oil industry. And there was plenty of soot and plenty of oil that you could dip your finger in and rub in to your scrimshaw that you had done and wipe it off. Some people surmised that they used India ink. I don't think that's likely because India ink was valuable for writing letters, which they all did. I think they used oil-based lamp black, basically. I chose not to use a dark color for the simple reason that there's so much busyness going on that it might make the whole thing dreary. So I picked a yellow ochre, and what we'll do is we'll dab some paint in and rub it in with a paintbrush, wipe it off with a towel, and let's see if we can get the image to pop with just enough contrast to be interesting. I'm not sure that the surface is sealed because I didn't use any sealer. If you're using ivory, a lot of people will use a polishing compound called ZAM and high-speed wheel. I didn't use any power tools on this piece. It's too fragile. I broke it too many times by hand, let alone to take a mechanized approach to it. So you can see the oil paint going in to the cracks. And a cursory wipe will show that in fact it is revealing some white. I don't know if it's enough. It does have a pleasant, warm, antique look to it. So let's continue and see if it helps the composition, or if it would be better to just leave these raw. And I think we can get this done in about 10 minutes. I kind of like that. It's a muted, soft, negative space. And it's done by shaving and burnishing with the side end of a blade. You can use a jeweler's burnishing tool, but I found that you can also break the shell with that tool, so I stopped doing it. This being my first piece, I kind of forgive myself for patching it up with white epoxy. Some purists would say that scrimshaw is limited to artifacts made by the whaling industry, 19th century New England. I would refute that. The oldest artifacts that we have from the Stone Age are ivory and bone pieces that have been scratched and incised and darkened by soot in an attempt to find some symbolic beauty to them. The word itself, scrimshaw, comes from a Dutch word, scrimshank, which described a sailor, might have been a good sailor, but he was a shirk when it came to deck work. Did not want to do deck work. And I don't blame him. The deck work we're talking about, it's not swab the deck with a mop like you see in the Popeye cartoons. These guys were down on hands and knees with a piece of rough stone, light but rough on your hands, and you would sand the deck from stem to stern and then start all over again. It was a constant process to keep the crustacean life from growing on the deck. And in order to avoid that, they would hide. They would find a sail locker or some other secluded place with a small source of light, and they would whittle on whatever they could do. There was scrimshaw on bone, on wood, on baleen, and the stuff that they made was scrimshaw because they were scrimshanks. Imagine the word meaning shirk in Dutch. Now, how does it get into the English lexicon? If you look at it historically, the Dutch and the English fought over the North Sea for hundreds of years. And quite frankly, the Dutch were masters long before the English were. Common practice, I think, of impressment of sailors meant that some of those sailors would end up on an American vessel, maybe impressed back into English service, maybe liberated, but they could end up in that part of the workforce called whalers. And the whaling population is different than the fishing population, and it's also different than the commercial shipping population, the clipper ships. Those guys went out and faced death at the hands of, 5-ton creatures that could easily smash their little whale boat that they went out to harpoon them in. And those guys were a cut above. They didn't have to hide from doing deck work. None was expected from a whaling scow because they were drenched in whale oil and soot. And it wasn't spit and polish anything. It was all just work while there were whales to capture and render into oil. So that and the fact that the whale's teeth were there, you could have them, meant that a lot of scrimshaw was done on the high seas by whalers. But it wasn't by any means the only place that engravings on ivory were being done. As a matter of fact, in Renaissance Italy, there was a fad, or how could I put it, a market for scrimshaw nautilus shells that were quite rare and quite valuable. See, we have the domes of the cathedral coming out in contrast now, so I guess my color wasn't too bad of a pick. Let's see. So anyway, I was saying the chamber nautilus were very hard to get because the Portuguese, because of the papal line of demarcation, I don't know when that was, 1519 or something, gave all of the Pacific to the Portuguese, and that's where the chamber nautilus is from. And so it cost a king's ransom just to get the piece, let alone to have it engraved and set on a base. Usually they took the time to set it in cast gold. So generally speaking, they are museum pieces that stayed in families for hundreds of years. That's where I saw it in a book, and that's how I started to scrimshaw nautilus shells. I think I'm coming around pretty well to the other side of the egg, and then I'll turn it and let you see what it is. There again, everything that I've incised will accept the pigmentation, and the blank areas have been polished and burnished as much as I can with an X-Acto knife, and they will resist the oil paint. Let's see, a little bit more. Now, I took liberties with the domes of St. Basil's and filled space with my rendition of the onion dome, the Russian Orthodox onion dome, basically in order to satisfy the curve of the curve of the shell of the ostrich egg shell, and the fact that you have to fill space, but it's hard to get a parallel line. But some of them might be recognizable, some of the domes. You're going to see some cracks in the egg because I dropped it about 100 times. You would think that I'd be more careful with an egg, but I've been working on this for 3 years. I used to take it everywhere with me, but now I limit it to places where if it falls, it'll fall on a carpet. Get down into the cracks where they exist. I don't know how long it takes oil paint to dry. A week? I usually just paint it, put it in a box and let it harden. See, these darker areas were cross-hatched in order to get a contrast. Now there's one area that is just not completed. And if you'll remember what I said the last time was, the foreground is the eagle's beak. and everything recedes from him, from his beak. These middle ground, background, because you can't just outline a space and expect it to turn out in 3D as a relief if you're carving in relief. It just doesn't, it's not part of the math. You have to work from the front and go to the back. But there's one area conspicuously not scrimshawed, and that is the dedication plate where I will sign it. And the reason is, I was hoping that through the marvels of the internet, maybe Russian Times will see this and tell Mr. Putin to take a look. It's his favorite cathedral, after all. Good Orthodox boy. And he would send me one simple word to put here in the dedication space. And I would like to have peace in Cyrillic, but it has to be church Cyrillic, not Russian, not Ukrainian, church Cyrillic, the oldest kind, from Saint Cyril's and Methodius. And then I'll sign it underneath, inconspicuously so. But Mr. Putin has his hands full right now, and I wish him the best in finding peace, and would like to convey to him that if the negotiations are onerous to him and he hates them, that's good. He's getting on the right track. And if they're onerous to both sides, now you're getting closer to truth, because that's how you get to peace. It's not that both sides like it, it's both sides hate it, but they hate war more because it becomes a Pyrrhic victory, too many deaths. My suggestion, Mr. Putin, give up the Crimea, but not to the Ukrainians. Give it up to the Tatars, the Crimean Tatars that had it for thousands of years, and Mr. Stalin deported them in, I think, 47. Ukrainians have to give it up too. It's not going to be anybody's country. Of course, you'll get Sevastopol to keep the peace. That's your port. The Donetsk, you're going to have to walk away from that. It's destroyed anyway, as you well know. And you could take a tip from Catherine the Great and reward those people who were loyal to you there and move them over to the Kuban Peninsula and give them some land. Be good neighbors for you and good bodyguards, always were. The Don River Cossacks were always preferred the Tsar to the West. As far as Ukraine goes, they can never be a part of NATO, and drop all claims of reparations to you or your country, and everybody go about business as usual, only at peace, because we know, according to the Devil's Dictionary, peace is that time after the last war when you prepare for the next war. And I think your people will very much appreciate that, because it's gone on too long, too many bodies. And, well, anyway, here's your cathedral, my interpretation of an American eagle or a Russian eagle flying over the Kremlin. This would be the bottom here. I'll spin it like it would be if it was on a stand. Done in ostrich eggs. And the end of my first project. Thanks for your patience and actually watching this little presentation.